the Two Men and a Business Continuity Plan podcast. Navigating success through uncertainty.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 8th episode in our podcast series, aptly named Two Men and a Business Continuity Plan with Charlie and James. And for those of you who have watched loads of these, I'm sorry, we're going to bore you again with who we are. And I'm going to start with Charlie. Quick intro, please.
So Charlie McLean Bristol, a business continuity professional by trade, and I've been doing this for slightly not as quite as long as James, but for so long.
Thanks, Charlie. He says that, so it makes me out to be much, much older than him, you see. That's the thing. And because nobody can see us, nobody's got any idea how old we actually are.
I'm James. He's the better looking one of the two. He's aged better than me.
I'm James McAllister. I've been doing organisational resilience, certainly in the policing environment for 30 years, and then 11 years with my own consultancy. And Charlie and I have worked together for a very long time on BC stuff with the Business Continuity Institute. So we've got a fair amount of experience. We've been around the block a few times. However, we are going to drag ourselves into this century with our topic today, because what we're going to look at is something that everybody's talking about. I mean, I'm obsessed with it. The advantages and disadvantages. And we're going to talk about today the potential advantages of using AI in business continuity management. So a little bit of background then. I mean, everybody's either in favor of it or against it, but AI is here. And with every single day, it gets more advanced. Some people think it's evil. Some people think it's fantastic, but I think there's potentially some great advantages of using it in business continuity planning, not to get rid of business continuity practitioners, but to make our job an awful lot easier. So first question that I'd like Charlie to think about is, what do we think about using AI to perform the currently considered laborious task of business impact analysis and risk assessment while we're with organizations?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. It's very funny. I went to the BCI, well, both of the BCI event in November, and everyone was shouting about AI. Everyone, oh, AI, you know. So the next big thing. I think it was social media a few years ago, and it's the supply chain and everything else. And I went to as many talks as I possibly can. I'm like about James. I like I like it, and I couldn't find anything useful that anyone was saying. The entire thing. The best use case I could find for it was someone using making up pictures, making up videos, and getting a little bit of exercise injects. Apart from that, nobody was using it interestingly at all. And I did have a conversation with the head of the BCI because I wrote on my kind of weekly blog, does no one do anything useful with this stuff? And he agreed with me. So at the moment, I don't think there's many people. Well, there obviously must be lots of people doing, but they're not all talking about it at the BCI. Business impact analysis and risk assessment is an interesting one. You see, I think the ultimate way is to do it. If you had an organization and you had your IT system and all your packets are flying around the network, going in, trundling out, trundling in again, you've got your HR system doing its thing, you've got your supply chain doing its thing, you've got contract management, you've got all this. Why can't we just do the BIA automatically? Why do we need to do all these kind of questions to go and find out all this information, which is, we all know, is sort of half-heartedly. We speak to one person, we'll have diligently, we'll get an hour and a half with them, and they will try their best and they give us the stuff, but the quality of the stuff is not very good. And we never have the time to have, like if you're doing an IT refresh or an IT new system, you would then spend hours and hours and hours, days interviewing about people and get really into that. We don't have the time in BI. No one's going to pay us for doing that long. We get an hour and that's bus. So it wouldn't be great if AI could whiz round and actually produce a BIA automatically without us even needing to do it, because it would know what IT is being used and know who's using the IT. it could almost go to the help desk and say, who squeaks as soon as this system is down? And then we can know the dependencies there as well. We know who the key suppliers are. We know who the staff are. So that would be great. But at the moment, I haven't met anyone who's doing that. What is your use case? Where do you...
Well, I mean, I've got to, I'll mention a little bit later on how I'm currently using it. But when I did my research around, AI and its ability to scrape data, because you sort of think how it works. And I suppose it's a little bit like the internet. You put in a question and it goes out and looks for it and it brings it back. But I think the benefit of AI is it doesn't just bring back the data, it links it together and makes sense of it. So the idea is that, as you said, it's all down to prompts. Having worked with it for a little bit, what you ask is what you get. So the more specific you can be in your request, the more likelihood the accuracy of your answer. So I think we're not long off. I mean, I think we could probably do it now, to be honest, with an internal ChatGPT type system where it's secure. You could then let it run amok on your system with the question around something like, what are the most used IT applications? And it would come up. Which PCs aren't used more than 5 times a week? That kind of thing. It would definitely find that out and definitely pinpoint that. Now, you might say IT would have that information already, but it might be around how many people use these different phones, how many people use this different number, how many people travel from here to there. Because theoretically, and I know this is one of the problems, that you've got to let it run over everything. And I know we're thinking Cyberdyne, I know we're thinking Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I know we're thinking of taking over the world, which scares the living daylights out of me, which we'll come to a little bit later. But if it can have access, i.e. that all your systems can talk to one another, and I know that's difficult with legacy systems, but if it can run amok over every system, it's going to be brilliant. I mean, not just a case of finding out data, identifying risks and vulnerabilities, but also theoretically looking over historical data. And
so I have this argument with people with some of our consultants about data, because they want to use it to analyze data. And they're saying for a BIA, what we could do is we get supply chain information, we could go and get IT information, we can get IT list, we can get a kind of, there are various places in our organizations where there are big chunks of data. But then, so you could go and get an IT list, which is very detailed. And often it's, where we talk about Workday, people say we'd have Workday. You find out actually there's 7 different versions of it doing 7 different things. And what you end up is, and then you do your interviews to get information. We get limited information. What you end up is very skewed information. And the information is also going on out of date day one. So you've got lots of information here, lots of information here, but you've got kind of very detailed and very open. And so to me, that doesn't really work. I'll tell you where we could do it now, and I don't know if people would like to do it, is there's nothing stopping us getting it to do BIA interviews. Because it is clever enough to say, if you set up the questions and send it on it straight away and say, nice open questions, talk to me about what your organization does. And it would transcribe all that stuff and do it down there. Talk to me about and what IT systems you use. And it could be clever enough to kind of say, have you thought of X, Y, and Z? It could collate all that information and could produce your starter for one. Now, you might need to go back to the people. I think you need to go back to people and say, let's talk about activities, because if you ask people, send out a questionnaire and say, tell me activities, you'll get 300 for one person and 2 from another, when it should be the opposite way around. And how we look at activities is different BIA to perhaps they do process mapping and stuff like that. So I think you still need to follow up, but all those basic questions: how many staff do you have? Where do your staff live? How many PCs do you have? All that kind of stuff, which is non-controversial, you could actually get it to doing. Now, whether people would be happy to talk to a machine, but
Well, they're doing
sometimes,
now. Every time you
yeah,
call a call center, you're talking to a virtual bot, aren't you? You're not. You're rarely talking to a human being. You think it's a human being because they're interactive. And the things you were saying about collecting data and it producing a transcript, they can do so much more than that. Imagine
yeah, they can
that it
do so.
interviews 200 people, but it can also then look for, if you ask the same question and you've set up that it understands what the people are saying, it can then look for patterns, trends, and anomalies, any form of analysis across
Yeah,
over 200 interviews, and look for the comparisons, the pros and cons, the things that stick out, the things that everybody's saying. And then a little bit like Copilot does, Microsoft Copilot is another big thing about it runs across all your Microsoft Office products and
yeah.
creates you summaries and reviews. I mean, I think with regard to data analysis, and I know you touched on supply chain. I mean,
Mm.
I mean, good old David Window talks about end-to-end supply chain visibility, and I always laugh. I throw tomatoes when he's talking about it because there's no such thing as end-to-end visibility because of the problem with how do you see the end, and this is the problem with all the
Mm.
data may be there, but as a human being, how do you find it? And this, I think, where AI can come in with any form of research, as long as you, as for example, that would be open source. So it'd be internally and open source that
Mm.
the AI would have to look, but it wouldn't be constrained by contracts. Because as you know, in supply chain, you've only got a contract with your tier one. You can only ask
Yeah,
your tier one. Your tier one can ask their tier one, which is your tier two, and so on. But the AI wouldn't need to go contractually because what it could look for is presence on the internet. So
yeah,
it would basically go out there like a police sniffer dog in a field, and it
yeah.
would just go and it would be sniffing around all over the place, trying to find any reference to your company, that product, that supplier, their suppliers, and what it would then be doing. Because I looked at something on YouTube the other day about a new form of AI. I can't remember the company, will remain nameless, but it connects different IT platforms and systems via addresses, known
Mm.
names, locations, and then builds a web of them. Well, that's just supply chain transparency
I
and
think there
mapping.
is, yeah, in supply chain. I've been doing some stuff on supply chain. Because supply chain, I used to do the BCI, I wrote the BCI course, and then it got superseded. But my last supply chain course was 2017, and no one's asked me. I've been asked once for some supply chain stuff like that. I was looking at supply chain, and they had this concept of digital twins. So you have your supply chain, and then you have a digital version of your supply chain, and then it's doing exactly, I think, what you're doing. It's pulling in data. So if you know that your goods go through Shanghai docks, it can look on X and go and see in Chinese and go and see, oh, there's a boat crashed in there or something going on fire, or there's a warehouse on fire. And so that can then do it. So I think that, yeah, I think probably people are doing that already. I
Well,
think
yeah,
like that. But
but see, for me, I mean, you've got lots of. I mean, I get the supply chain updates on LinkedIn and via my email
yeah,
that the BCI do through other people. And it's great, but that's a human being going out and trawling that
yeah,
information. Imagine if you could, in the morning, say, how does my supply chain look? Are there any disruptions? Because predicting, like it's looking at the Suez Canal, it's looking at Shanghai Dock, it's looking at
yeah.
Hong Kong, it's looking at the Straits of Malacca, it's looking at the ports
Well, it can
down
even
in
trace
Dover.
the boats that your stuff is on.
Yeah,
See if it's going a bit
because
slow today, or
you can, like you can do with planes, you can map every plane in the world.
so you can
You
do it
can
with
map every
ships as
ship in the
well.
world.
Yeah,
It could be real-time predictive data about that ship is now 4 hours late. The knock-on effect is it's going to miss its slot at Dover. Therefore, your tomatoes, Charlie, are not going to
mm.
be here today.
I think that's not even AI. I think that is, I think is software is just pulling all those things together. But I think AI gives us the ability to pull in more feeds and more information and more, more stuff together. But I think it's also you can use AI to kind of crunch it to kind of see what is useful, the outputs of it, because it's, you can have tons of data, but you still need to process and do something useful with it.
Yeah. And this is where your prompts to it. I mean, another thing is the idea of using AI in decision making, scenario modeling, simulations, exercises, testing potential strategies before you commit resources and funding.
See, I'm not sure about that. I think the idea is nice. I'm not sure how much it can understand the world to say, should I be going for this strategy or that strategy, recovery strategy? I'm not sure it has the detailed knowledge to be able to do this.
But it's got all the detailed knowledge that is out there. And that's, I mean, I know that can be the advantage and the disadvantage. But I mean,
Hmm.
having used it for example, I have used it for scenario planning. So
Yeah.
I'm working with a company at the moment, and I said, okay, write me a scenario for a company in Guatemala that is suffering this at the moment. I want it 48 hours, 24 hours, moment of impact, and 4 weeks afterwards. What would be the implications? What would be the thought? What would be this? What would be that? And it did. And it said analyzing, and I waited a little bit, and then it came up. And then when I copied and pasted it out and put it onto a Word and read it, I thought, actually, that's probably saved me about 4 hours, 5 hours of research.
Yeah, I think you're getting more onto which I think it is brilliant for. And I think there's a good Joe Maloney, I think he's a kind of like professor of consulting. And one of the things he talks about is about AI is a good junior consultant. Someone can say, when in the old days, when you're probably in your police days, because you know what my band is to say, Jimmy, go and find out something about this and come back and tell me. Well, they say we stick it in AI and 30 seconds, like come back. And I was looking at a list of what was it? I was looking at a list of what does good cyber incident management look like from a crisis comms point of view? And its list was better than my list. And I probably would come up with a list anyway, but its list is better than my list. And I can slap that in within 2 seconds and do it and move on, rather than having to think about it for 10 minutes and come up with and refine it and refine it and refine it. So I think we as consultants who sell, we're kind of the knowledge market. I think we need to be really careful about what it can do better than us and utilizing that, and what can we do better than it. So I think we need to really embrace it, because it's going to so fundamentally change everything that we do that I always think you have to ride the wave, you have to surf the wave,
Of course you do. I
but
mean,
not it
the
crash
only
over you.
reason, I mean, you've been running a consultancy for a lot longer than me, and the only reason you are still doing what you're doing at the level you're doing it at is because you've been prepared to adapt and change to an
No,
ever-evolving
definitely that.
environment. And AI is just another tool we can use to make things better. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was sat in a live course last week with an educational establishment, and we were talking about crisis management, and we were talking about holding statements. And I said, really, pre-prepared holding statements based on your primary risks. So look at your risk register, look at the things you're writing plans around, and for each one of those plans, have a holding statement. Somebody in the room said, what am I using chat GBT? And I'm
Yeah,
not on a percentage for chat GPT. It's really
yeah.
the only one I use. And a lady in the group said, what am I using chat GBT for writing a holding statement? And I said, let's do it. So live in the class, the lady with her phone, with everybody sat round, put into chat GBT, provide a holding statement. We're this kind of organization, diddly diddly do. And we've suffered the death of a student. Write me a holding statement. And she read it out. And I was sat there like you with that problem you gave it. I was like, that would have taken me probably a couple of hours to mull over, getting it as beautifully and as sensitively worded as Chat GBT did in 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the great uses of it. Let's try and think something a little bit different. And actually, I think this is something you could do now. We've got plans. I normally have a plan, kind of generic plan. We have a plan structure, and and then we might have some contingency plans for different events, and we got some BIAs and some different things. But of course, our plan never tries contact with the enemy. It's never quite as we envision it, and this is affected, not that is affected. Why don't we have our plans in ChatGPT? Why not have our BIAs in there and say, produce me a checklist and a working plan for this incident, taking into account that data? And so you can tell it which buildings affected, which IT systems, and then it will produce, these are the RTOs for the affected ones, these are the RTOs for the buildings if you've got them. This is what your strategies are. So you could produce plans on the fly for the specific incident which is happening.
I think.
So of course, I
don't think that's far off.
Well, I can do that tomorrow. You don't need to set up, you need to have a framework. You need to say who's in the incident team. You need to have, where they go, some of the details of what their roles and responsibilities are, because he's not going to be able to do that in the day. I'm going to contradict myself in a second, but you could do that. It could go and then go to the BIA and see what is relevant to this incident and pull in the BIA. Because no one ever pulls in the BIA stuff, do they? They never get round to it. You're all busy in the incident. And you just leave the poor BIA as be sitting there in the corner, wallflower, no one wants to dance with it. And everyone's had lots of effort with it. So you could pull in this stuff and it could say, give me a checklist for a student dying, because I haven't got a student dying plan, but I bloody hell need one now. Give me a checklist for that, and it would produce within 30 seconds, and you could take into account your own details. So it could do, if you've got, if it was an education setting, if it's the under 10s, it's going to be different from the over, but
yeah,
it could do that. Now that thing, would we need business continuity software? Because we could just have all these things in don't let Fusion and Risk Connect to them lot here, yeah. But that's what you could have, is you could just have them as Word documents, and you need the right kind of context, so you need the right bot to do it. But
you still need, because it's great having that real life information at the time, but you'll still need people to think about setting up the context, putting solutions in place, thinking about risk. And I definitely think it's a brilliant addition to what we do. But I still think there's room for experience in there. I definitely
think there is, because I think there's always room for judgment. And I think there's room for ChatGPT say that, but that's just wrong, because it is sometimes wrong, or that doesn't make sense, or I don't think you do that. But I think for us, it's just going to save us lots of time, so we can come up with a starter for one and we can adjust it. But we don't need to waste the 4 hours coming up with a starter for one, because it takes you 4 hours to think about it.
What about what scares you then? Because we're coming into the dying hours of our podcast. So what about the data privacy? Reliable. I read an article the other day. They're now called AI hallucinations, where AI goes off and looks and comes back with misinformation.
Yeah. It's much better now, because I put in a certain client and I wanted to learn about an event, and it told me all about this great event which didn't happen. So do you know there's just looking at what happened on Friday, you kind of, don't people scare you much more than computers scare you? And
definitely.
we'll not go there. But yeah, there is the chance. I would quite like my ChatGPT to be nice to me, say, "Morning, Charlie. How are you doing? How are you feeling today? You're looking a bit rough." I just would like it to do that. I'd like more personality in it.
There are ones. Do you remember at BC? Did you go to that lecture at BCI World where the guy said he sat for 2 hours in a car?
Oh yeah,
having a conversation with it. I was like, I'm not going to sit in the car having a conversation with AI.
Yeah.
Really? we're driving along going, what do you think of it then? I think this, and I think that. I mean, it's like, I can understand having an academic discussion.
I think it was an
something.
academic discussion. I don't think he was saying, "Am I looking good today?"
Well, yeah, of course you are, Charlie. You're looking fantastic, like every day, because you bought me. You bought the application.
Virtual girlfriends. There are virtual girlfriends out there. People are engaging with them. So
no, it's and I mean, I'm scared about they're gonna get an awful lot of information, and they're going to be able to connect all the dots. What if they're hacked? What if you hack into that? And it's not as though everything's all over the place, so it can take months to infiltrate your system. You could get in and ask the AI a question, and within 30 seconds, it tells you all your company's secrets.
Yes. I think my more scary bit is that what happens if it's not there?
Oh, God, reliance. Over-reliance, yeah.
No.
I hadn't thought of that.
Much more than that.
Yeah.
Much more than that is to say, I can't operate without it. I can't, I'll be so slow because I've forgotten how to do a whole lot of stuff, and I rely on AI to do it. So my worry is over reliance on it rather than the opposite way around.
Yeah, that reminds me of Sunday morning doing my my youngest daughter's maths homework, where she gets asked some of these incredibly difficult maths questions, and I sneak off into the lounge and go, ChatGPT, Esther has this, and Lauren has that, and somebody has something else. What's the 3/4% of a divide by this and that? And it gives me the answer, and I go back in and go, yeah, it's 4. So it's great for that, but yeah, I mean, it has some brilliant uses.
Yeah.
However, Charlie, I'm afraid that once again time has got away with us. So, any final thoughts on AI?
Yeah, I think you've got to embrace it. You've got to play with it. You've got to speak to people who are using it, because if you know it can do something, you can work out how to do it. But if you don't know it can do something, you'll never do it. So speak to people, embrace it, play with it, poke it, prod it. It's brilliant.
I think giving it a go. I was very apprehensive because I was unsure. And now I know you've got to use it for specific things. I'm getting a handle on it. And very much like you, I smile and laugh and go, how does it do? It's magic. It's a miracle. How does it do it? It's a miracle.
I have no idea how it does it. Yeah, I'm absolutely with you. How does it know that stuff?
And so beautifully written.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wow. It really is. So on that final, very positive tone, and the fact that next week the podcast will be done by 2 AI versions of James and Charlie. Remember, everybody, we are now on Apple Podcast. So YouTube, Apple Podcast, various other platforms. Please subscribe to us. Please like us. And please send us in some questions. So we've got maybe some ideas for future podcasts. But thanks very much for listening, and see you next time.
See you next time.